The sound of splintering wood jolted me from sleep like a thunderclap. Then came the scream. "Get out here! I'm calling the cops!" I sat up, heart pounding, and reached instinctively for the bat I kept beside the bed. Footsteps stomped across my floorboards. Furniture bumped. Something crashed in the kitchen. And then, like a bizarre dream turned nightmare, I saw her silhouette in the doorway. Robe, flashlight, hair like she'd been struck by lightning. "You've got about 10 seconds before the sheriff gets here," she shrieked. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my phone, not to call 911, to wait for them to arrive, because the woman screaming in my house at 2 a.m. had no idea who'd be stepping out of that patrol car or who he'd be shaking hands with first. If you think this is another petty neighbor drama, buckle in, because by the end of this story, one Karen finds out what happens when you pick the wrong cabin and the wrong man. Stick around. Like, subscribe. You don't want to miss how this ends. Let's rewind. I didn't move to the woods to fight. I moved here to disappear. 3 years ago, I quit a job that took too much and gave too little. Training emergency response teams in cities where everyone screams and no one listens. I spent a decade teaching calm in chaos, helping others handle the worst days of their lives. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what peace even felt like. So I bought a cabin, remote. Old. Needed work. But surrounded by trees, a mountain view, and more silence than I'd had in years. My only neighbor was a deer that liked to stare at me while chewing leaves. It was perfect, until she arrived. I heard her before I saw her. A car I didn't recognize. A trunk slamming. The crisp staccato sound of someone yelling into a phone about unacceptable gravel grading and property line confusion. I peeked through the blinds. New SUV, bright clothes, clipboard. Even in the middle of nowhere, Karen had found me. Her real name was Dana, but names don't matter. The type is unmistakable. She moved into the rental cabin just down the hill. A weekender getaway, barely maintained, except she wasn't using it as a getaway. She'd moved in, full-time, and by day 2, she declared herself Queen of the Ridge. It started with a knock. "Hi, I'm Dana. I just wanted to introduce myself and go over some expectations." "Expectations?" She smiled. "The tight kind. I represent the community standard here. There's no formal HOA, but we all sort of keep each other accountable." I blinked. "There's no one else here." She nodded. "Exactly, which means it's up to us." Us. She handed me a sheet of printer paper with bullet points. Quiet hours 8 p.m., 8 a.m. No outside tools after dusk. No burning wood without permit. And please keep all firearms secured. I've reported gunshots before. I stared at it. "Thanks," I said, and closed the door. That was week 1. By week 2, I had 3 printed notices under my windshield wipers. One for unsightly stacking of firewood, one for overuse of generator, and one for non-compliant fencing. I didn't have a fence. By week 3, she started walking by with a flashlight after dark, shining it at my windows, sometimes stopping, just staring. One night I opened the door mid-stare. She jumped. "Oh, just making sure no animals were getting into your bins. They're bear-proof." "Well, sometimes humans are worse than bears." Then she smiled, the type that burns. I told myself to ignore it. Don't escalate. Keep my peace until the dog. I don't own one, but someone started leaving dog poop in my yard. Same spot. Every morning, neatly dropped like a message. And one morning after scooping it up with a shovel, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Dana, watching from behind a tree with binoculars. She ducked the second I turned. I didn't even say anything. I just waved. It all built slowly. 1,000 cuts. The missing mail. The fake citations. The time she stood in the middle of my driveway blocking my car because you failed to RSVP for the community check-in. There was no RSVP, there was no check-in, there was only her. And then came that night. I'd been asleep maybe 2 hours. Full moon, windless night, dead quiet. Then bam! Door flew open like it had been rammed. A flashlight beam hit the ceiling. I heard her yelling about chemical smells and gunshots and suspicious sounds. I grabbed the bat, stood in the hallway in my boxers. She spotted me and shouted, "I knew it! I knew you were dangerous!" I said nothing. She pulled out her phone, hit speaker, and screamed, "I need police! Now! There's a man with weapons! I think he's been cooking something! I saw him!" She was breathless, eyes wild, like she'd finally summoned the confrontation she'd been dying for since the day she moved in. She had no idea what she'd just done. 24 minutes. That's how long it took for the first patrol car to arrive. By then, she'd barricaded herself inside my cabin. I stood outside in the cold, arms crossed, trying not to laugh as I listened to her pace inside, yelling updates to 911. "Yes, yes, I'm still here. He's gone outside now. I think he's trying to flee." I heard my own coffee mug crash onto the floor. He might be destroying evidence. I leaned against a tree, waiting. The cruiser came around the bend, lights flashing low and slow. I recognized the vehicle before I recognized the man behind the wheel. But the moment he stepped out, it hit me. "Chief Riley?" I said, grinning. He turned toward me, did a double take, and broke into a smile. "No way," he said, walking up with his hand outstretched. "Well, I'll be damned. Didn't think I'd see you on a call like this." Behind him, his partner was already stepping out, one hand resting on the grip of her holstered taser. They didn't draw. They didn't need to. Riley and I shook hands like old friends. Because that's what we were. I trained him years ago, back when he was just another city rookie trying to pass his tactical response certifications without freezing during scenario drills. Now he was chief of 911 services for 3 counties. And Dana had no clue. "What's going on?" he asked, though I could tell he already knew the answer. "She broke into my house, screaming, kicked in the door, called you guys." "She say what for?" "Said I was cooking meth and had guns everywhere." "Oh, and that I screamed at her through the walls with a megaphone." He laughed, actually laughed. "Jesus. Want to check for a meth lab? I'll bring marshmallows." He turned to his partner. "Cover me." They stepped up to the porch. I followed at a distance. From inside. "I'm not coming out until he's arrested." Riley knocked. "Ma'am, police." Silence. "Ma'am, this is Chief Riley of the County 911 office. You need to come out now." Nothing. Then ours slowly. The door creaked open. Dana appeared like a villain in the final scene of a play, wild-eyed, lips pursed, righteous fire in her bones. "Thank God," she snapped. "I've been under siege here. He threatened me. He has chemicals. You need to search the entire property immediately." Riley took one look at her and sighed. Then he pointed to me. "You mean him?" She nodded. "Ma'am, this man trained half my department in incident response and defensive operations. He has more certifications than my entire staff combined." Her jaw moved, but no sound came out. Riley continued, stepping forward. "He also happens to be a legally registered firearms owner, lives quietly, and until tonight, had never once had us called out to this road." Dana blinked. "But the chemicals." "Cleaning products," I said flatly, "for the deck." "The noises?" "Chopping wood." The yelling?" "Bluetooth speaker." I was watching a game. Her eyes darted from me to Riley. "You're taking his side?" "No, ma'am," he said. "I'm taking the laws." The next 15 minutes were a circus of denial. She refused to leave until she was formally cleared of all suspicion. She demanded my cabin be searched. She told Riley I was gaslighting the entire ridge. At one point, she claimed I hacked her Wi-Fi and controlled her thermostat remotely. The officer with Riley finally stepped in and read her rights. Not as an arrest, not yet, but as part of an official statement procedure. Riley pulled me aside as Dana was escorted to sit on a rock under supervision. "She's not right," he said, "and she's definitely not going to stop." I nodded. I figured. "You want to press charges?" I paused, and then shook my head. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because it's not just about me anymore." The next morning, I printed everything. Photos, notes, the clipboard rules, screenshots of every fake violation she left on my car, her zoning complaint, the reports of noise violations. I organized them in a folder like a lawyer prepping for trial, and then I went door to door. Cedar Hill didn't have a real neighborhood, just scattered cabins that had become reluctant witnesses to her reign of harassment, and one by one, They opened their doors, some cautiously, some apologetically, all of them ready to talk. The Schroeders? She accused their granddaughter of polluting the aesthetic environment for drawing chalk on the porch. The Delaney twins? She threatened to report them for unauthorized poultry when their chickens crossed the driveway. She even tried to evict the Bennett family for installing solar panels without architectural approval. Every cabin had a story. Every one of us had been her target. I collected testimonies, dates, screenshots. I built a timeline. And then I did what she never expected. I made her the problem. I took it all to the county, not just the sheriff's office. I went to zoning, utilities, animal control, even the regional housing board. Where she had written HOA chair, I submitted proof there was no such authority. Where she had claimed community support, I submitted 10 letters from neighbors begging for relief. I called it the anti-HOA file, and I gave Riley a copy. Give her a chance, I said. Let her back off, quietly. But if she didn't, we'd be ready. I didn't see her for a few days. After the incident, she vanished like smoke in the trees. No cars in her driveway, no flashlight beams scanning my windows, no angry notes pinned to tree trunks. Nothing. It was the quietest Cedar Hill had felt since she'd arrived. And yet I knew better. She wasn't done. She was just regrouping. Karens don't surrender. They recalibrate. It started small. One morning I found a fresh notice of violation taped to my trash bin. Unsigned, unbranded, and absurd. Failure to comply with zone decorum standards. Containers not properly camouflaged. Camouflaged, as if the bears cared how my trash cans looked. The next day, a single red zip tie appeared on my gate. No message. Just there. Tight, centered. Then I heard it. The low whine of a drone. Not high-end. One of those cheap quadcopters. It hovered above my garden for 10 full minutes before buzzing off toward her cabin. I followed it with binoculars. Right into her yard. I confronted her the next morning. Didn't knock. Didn't send a note. I waited until I saw her step outside to water her plastic flowers. Then walked right up to the property line. You flying drones over my house now? I asked. She didn't even blink. I'm within my rights to monitor environmental violations. I crossed my arms. You're trespassing in the air. Then call the FAA, she said, smirking. Let's see who they believe. She turned and walked back inside like she just won a duel, but she hadn't read the room. Again, because this time I wasn't alone. Later that day, a folded note appeared on my porch. No envelope, just tucked under a stone. I opened it. You're not the only one she's watching, it said. No signature, just a phone number. I called. A man answered. Quiet voice. Said his name was Clay. Lived 3 properties over. Dana had threatened to sue him for noise pollution because of his dog barking at deer. She reported his fire pit, said his grill smelled hostile, and once accused his 5-year-old of aggressive chalk drawing. She wants control, he said. Not peace, just power. He had footage, emails. One of his cameras caught her trespassing onto his property, flashlight in hand. At 2 in the morning. He'd reported it. Nothing happened. I saw what she did to you, Clay said. The 911 thing. I figured you weren't going to let that slide. You figured right. Let me know how I can help. The file grew thicker. Dozens of pages now. Testimony, timestamps, drone footage, copies of city and county codes she'd violated. We printed out screenshots of her fake community memos, had neighbors sign affidavits. Even found an old Craigslist post where she offered local governance coaching for rural newcomers. Yes, governance coaching, like a self-appointed tyrant for hire. I submitted the full packet to the sheriff's office and copied zoning, housing compliance, and, just for fun, the county ethics committee. Still, part of me worried, because sometimes systems protect chaos, and Dana knew how to cry victim with enough flair to confuse the slow ones. But then something happened I hadn't expected. The mayor called me. Mayor Bender wasn't flashy. He ran unopposed for 3 terms and still acted like every vote might vanish. I'd met him once, during a disaster drill where I helped train county responders on wildfire evacuation procedures. He remembered me. and apparently he'd heard the story. She called me, he said, voice low, like he didn't want the phones to hear. Said you were leading a vigilante anti-HOA uprising. Is that what she's calling it? She said you were threatening her, trying to destabilize the neighborhood, asked if I could issue a citation for hostile rural displacement. I laughed. That's not a thing. I know. He paused, then said something I didn't expect. I told her to back off, that the county supports individual property rights, and that if she kept pushing, we'd have to investigate her. That was the turning point, the moment the weight shifted. The next morning I saw the drone again, but this time I was ready. I tracked it from my deck using a second-hand signal sniffer I'd bought online. Took me less than 5 minutes to trace the controller frequency back to her shed. Then I called Riley. I've got her flying surveillance over multiple homes, I told him. You sure? I'm positive. Want footage? No need, he said. We've been building a file too. That night they knocked on her door. I didn't watch. Didn't need to. I just stood in my kitchen sipping coffee, while red and blue lights flashed across my windows like quiet applause. She wasn't arrested, not yet, but she was warned, formally, and the drone, confiscated. I saw her the next morning, standing on her porch in a bathrobe, staring at the empty sky like someone who'd just lost her throne. And then, for the first time since she arrived, she closed her blinds. A week passed. No drones, no notes, no fake violations about trash cans or tree alignment. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The forest sounded like a forest. The porch didn't feel like a trap. Neighbors started waving more often. One of them brought me a pie. It had been baked from a box, but it meant something. And Dana stayed quiet, too quiet, which meant she was planning something. Karens don't retreat, they reframe. I didn't have to wait long. At 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, a motion alert pinged my phone. I rolled over, grabbed it, thumbed open the feed. My back porch, a flashlight beam, then her alone, hood up, phone in one hand, what looked like a tape measure in the other. She walked the back fence slowly, stopping every few feet, pressing something against the posts. I didn't move, didn't shout, just started recording. The next day a letter arrived, folded in half, stuffed under my door. Her handwriting was unmistakable. Boundary violation notice. According to her measurements, my fence extended 14 inches into bufferland. She demanded I move it within 48 hours or face civil structure enforcement. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then I called Clay. He'd gotten the same letter. So did the Schraders. So did the Bennetts. This was her new game. War by tape measure, passive-aggressive cartography. She didn't need an HOA if she could weaponize property lines. Problem was, she was wrong. I had the original boundary map. County certified GPS tagged. My fence wasn't an inch out of place, so I did what she never expected. I invited her to talk. She showed up the next morning, clipboard in hand, eyes shielded by oversized sunglasses. I stood on my porch with a coffee and a calm she didn't deserve. Dana, I said, come on up. She hesitated, then climbed the steps. What do you want? She asked, defensive already. To end this, I said. Right here, right now. She scoffed. You think you can intimidate me? I handed her a folder. Inside, every county-approved map, surveyor signatures, permits, coordinates. I watched her flip through it, faster and faster, until she slammed it shut. You probably know someone in zoning, she muttered. Or maybe, I said, I just follow the law. She shook her head. You don't get it. This place needs order. If no one's watching, people ruin things. They paint ugly colors. They park boats on lawns. They start fires. And if someone is watching too hard, I asked. She didn't answer, just stepped back and walked away. That night I saw her driveway fill with cars, 4 of them. She was having a meeting. I watched through the trees. Dana standing on her porch with what looked like charts and printed maps, her voice rising and falling like a preacher losing followers by the minute. At one point, someone stood up mid-sentence and walked off into the dark. Another followed. By the end of it, only 1 car remained. Then it too drove off. I don't know what she promised them. But whatever it was, they weren't buying. 2 days later, I got a call. Riley, we've received formal complaints from 7 other property owners, he said. All against her? Yup. About the measuring? About a lot more than that. One guy said she accused his kids of building subversive structures in the woods. I blinked. Treehouse? Exactly. He paused. We're opening an official inquiry. The following week, the county sent a letter to Dana, certified mail. I saw her take it from the carrier with shaking hands. It was an order to cease any and all unofficial enforcement activity. Any future complaints must go through the proper legal channels. She'd been muzzled. She didn't take it well. For 2 days, she marched through her property with a clipboard, writing furiously, even though no one was around. On the 3rd day, a new sign appeared at the edge of her driveway. This community is under surveillance. Violators will be prosecuted. No one cared. By Friday, she tried one last stunt. She drove to town and made a public complaint at the council hall, claimed she was being terrorized by a loose collective of anarchists. She brought the evidence. My neighbor's chalk drawings, Clay's bird feeders, the Bennett's solar panels. The clerk at the front desk asked for her HOA credentials. She said she was self-appointed. The clerk smiled. That's not a thing. And just like that, the structure collapsed. Not with a bang, with a blink. Because when a Karen loses her illusion of control, she's left with nothing but noise. And out here, noise doesn't travel far. It ended with a truck. Not police, not lawyers, not a crowd of neighbors dragging her off the porch in protest. Just a truck. White plain, no logos. Pulled up around 9 a.m. one crisp morning, crunching gravel with a finality I could feel from my porch. I watched as 2 men stepped out. Movers. She was leaving. No announcement, no farewell, no last-ditch memo about property decency standards or shrub spacing policies. Just the sound of boxes hitting the truck bed. A few neighbors gathered along the trail, not to celebrate, not exactly, more like to confirm it was real. Clay nodded to me from his driveway. The Schraders stood arm in arm. The Bennett's kids waved, even though they didn't know why. Someone passed out coffee. No one spoke her name. I kept my distance, watched from the porch as her house slowly emptied. Piece by piece, her grip on the ridge dissolved. That clipboard she clutched like a weapon. Gone. The drone control station she'd installed in her shed. Boxed up. The laminated rule signs she nailed to trees. Pulled down one by one. I saw her once. She looked up from a box and caught my eye. No scowl, no smirk, just tired. Then she turned away. By afternoon, the truck was full. She got into the passenger seat of a silver SUV, closed the door, and didn't look back. No middle finger, no shouted warning, no final promise that the county would hear about this. She just left. The gravel settled, the trees exhaled. That night, I walked the ridge. The silence was thicker than I remembered. Not empty, but healed, like the forest itself had waited for her to go. At the foot of her old driveway, I found something, a small laminated sheet half buried in leaves, one of her early creations. Respect your community or leave it. I laughed so hard I had to sit on a stump to catch my breath. Then I took it home and burned it. Weeks passed. The cabin sat vacant, for sale, listed as a peaceful mountain escape. A lie, but now maybe not. Life returned to normal, whatever normal is when your neighbors aren't screaming through trees at 3 a.m. I fixed my door, replanted the garden, installed new porch lights, not for security, just because they made the cabin feel warm. And one day a new couple pulled up to view her place. Young, smiling, asked questions like, "What's the soil like?" And, "Is it okay to have chickens?" I said yes, and welcome. Sometimes I still think about her, not with anger, not even with satisfaction, with clarity. She wasn't unique. She was the voice of a certain kind of fear, the fear of losing control, of irrelevance, of silence. But here's the thing about silence. It doesn't mean weakness. It's what comes after the noise. It's the sound of someone running out of steam, running out of power, running out of places to push. And when it finally settles, that's when you build. Not with memos, not with rules, but with roots. That night, I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee and watched the stars return to their place in the sky. Peace at last. Real peace. Earned. And I whispered to myself, let them try again. Because now I know exactly what to do when someone brings noise to a place that was never meant to be loud. You wait, you breathe, you hold the line. And when the time is right, you let the silence speak.